Hello, my name is Braden Stump, and I'm the president of Handix Scientific, as well as the responsible engineer on the BioSpot-VIVAS bioaerosol sampler. And today, I'm here to talk to you about a procedure that we perform at Handix and an experiment that you can perform to troubleshoot your BioSpot-VIVAS instrument, but also to be able to have knowledge of your instrument prior to experimentation. And it's something that we call the spot test. So in this video, I'm going to go over why you might want to perform a spot test, as well as how you would perform a spot test, and then what that spot test could potentially tell you about the operation of your instrument. One quick precursor to this, I am assuming in this video that you have already familiarized yourself with operation of the BioSpot-VIVAS bioaerosol sampler. If you haven't, you can watch some of the other videos available on this page, as well as read the manual of the instrument or visit the Handix Scientific website. So first and foremost, what a spot test is. So the idea behind a spot test is right in the area where the BioSpot-VIVAS samples into the Petri dishes, the 35 millimeter Petri dishes that are kind of the mainstay of sampling for the VIVAS. It is a means to check full operation of the BioSpot-VIVAS as an instrument. It allows you to confirm that airflow is flowing properly. It allows you to confirm that the wicks are wet on the instrument, and it allows you to confirm that the temperatures are correct, even though many of those things are told to you via external meters and things like that. And finally, allows you to know that aerosol is actually being captured into the Petri dish at the base of the growth tube of the instrument. These are a few pictures of successful spot tests that I've performed over the years with different VIVAS instruments. Spot tests, we have to do three of them on an instrument. It has to pass prior to one of the many tests prior to being cleared out the door for production to ship. And as you can see, we'll go into this in more detail later. Each of these spots corresponds to the 8 different growth tubes on the BioSpot-VIVAS, as well as the 3 jets per growth tube here. But prior to going any further, I've got a VIVAS over here that I'm going to turn on, and I'm going to make sure that it is at temperature as we're going, and we'll start talking through the plumbing diagram of the VIVAS and why this makes sense. So, uh, yes, there are means of being able to see the temperatures of each stage on the screen. You can figure out with a galibrator or another airflow meter what the airflow is at the inlet of the VIVAS. And you can confirm via removal to the waste bottle that the wicks are wet on the instrument. However, one of the things that I've seen users want to be able to do, and it's something we also want to be able to do in the lab, is have a quick check in the morning prior to performing a lot of experimentation that the VIVAS is working properly, right? You're able to sample into a Petri dish and do what you think you're going to do. It also is a useful way. People also want to be able to check for clogs in their jets in some capacity. And just kind of have a way to know, yep, for aerosol that's coming in, I am getting droplets that are impacting into a Petri dish. So the way the spot test works is effectively you place a dry Petri dish into the base sample area here of the VIVAS, and then you turn it on and perform normal sampling as usual for a short period of time. And what you actually have occur in that period of time, air, as long as it is flowing through the instrument, flows through the same as a condensation growth tube normally does. Water continues to be injected onto the wicks, of course, forming a wet wick. And then the temperature changes here allow for condensation onto particles in the airflow, right? Just typical room air. Those form into droplets, and those then are shot out of the nozzle, and those droplets hit this Petri dish. And unless you have those three things in the VIVAS working, airflow, temperatures correct, as well as wet wick, that is the only way that you are able to see this deposition pattern on the Petri dish, right? Typically, we have liquid in the Petri dish. In this case, we're wanting it to prove that it can deposit particles in the form of droplets. So, talk more about it in detail later. But of course, if your wick is dry, if water's not injecting onto the wicks, you are not going to see a deposition pattern of little liquid drops here. So we'll look at it in a sec. One other thing of note with this flow path here, excess liquid water is removed off of the wicks prior to going through the standpipes and jets of the actual nozzles of the VIVAS itself, which means that, if you have liquid coming out of your jets, that is, of course, flooding. So you would not see the correct deposition pattern here. And the only way that water is able to make it through the jets is in the form of a droplet or as fully 100% RH saturated air, but that's kind of a lesser effect compared to the droplets once you actually start performing tests like these. Uh, while we still have this slide up, one other thing that I was going to show off, you can see with each of these tests, which I will also end up showing on my camera as well, the nice deposition pattern here. This black pattern was actually formed by sampling dry aerosol for a much longer period of time. But mostly you can see these little bubbles here that are just small depositions of water onto a dry Petri dish corresponding to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 growth tubes, 3 jets per growth tube. If you aren't seeing, for example, one of these jets or multiple of these jets, it very well might be that one of your jets is clogged. Gunk from your experimentation in some capacity is not working correctly, right? It's clogged your nozzle and you need to clean it out in some capacity. Similarly, if you're only seeing half of these for some reason, if you're only seeing, 4 of these 8 patterns here, that probably means that one of your liquid injection pumps is stuck and is not injecting and the other one is. There's a lot that you can learn from these experiments generally. So I will now be able to show you how to do them. A quick recommendation prior would be you can typically perform this right after you've wetted your wicks in the morning before a battery of experiments that you might perform, which can be useful primarily because you want to know that your machine is working prior to actually operating it. So I'm going to drop screen share and we're going to start actually using this thing. So I have a BioSpot-VIVAS over here. As you can see, I've got it at its typical default temperatures, or to be honest, close enough. We're at 5 degrees Celsius on the conditioner, 45 degrees Celsius on the initiator, 15 degrees Celsius on the moderator, 27 on the nozzle. The ambient temp is, of course, not under our control. And then I have 15 degrees here on the sample, which is down below, but I'm not currently using the sample. Of important note that when you are actually doing some of these spot tests, you can actually see a little bit of a increased effect of gain onto the Petri dish just because of the coldness of the surface if you are using the sample cooler. Just something to keep in mind, not necessarily an issue at hand. Of note, I've got a piece of tubing here on the inlet, but this is still pulling in room air. We'll talk about the effect that aerosol has on these tests in just a moment. So I have confirmed plenty already prior to this experiment that the wick is wet. I have injected quite a few counts into the instrument, so I know that it's wet. Water is being removed to the waste bottle. I know that the temperatures are correct. I actually confirmed right before this with a gillibrator that the flow at the inlet is correct. In this case, I'm doing 15 liters per minute. You can do this at effectively any flow rate in the range that the Vivas works. I would say, you could do anywhere from 8 to 15. 8-liter per minute tests and 15-liter per minute tests will have different like pattern growth rates as far as how quickly you're seeing the deposition there, but it's not a big deal at all. So the way we're going to do this, you can actually just do this without a Petri dish installed too. We're going to install a Petri dish in here, and then you probably won't be able to see it at the same time. So I'm just going to have it down here. We're going to install a dry Petri dish into the instrument, turn the pump on. I will verbally say when the pump is on because you won't be able to see these things simultaneously via video. And then we'll remove it after about 30 seconds to a minute or whenever you can actually see, you can actually see the droplets on the surface. And then we will draw conclusions about the performance of the instrument as a result. Great. So I'm going to do that. Cool. So Petri dish is tightly installed. I'm going to turn on the pump now. Most of the time you can actually watch the game. I will do that. Great. That should be fine to demonstrate the point, although we'll probably do this a few times. Make sure to turn off the pumps prior to removing the Petri dish, or else you will not be able to see the pattern. So I am actually going to redo this experiment because my oily fingers made this kind of move around on the Petri dish a bit. So you can see you are getting a deposition pattern here, but it's kind of moving around the Petri dish. That is because I was using my fat finger in here and getting the surface a little oily. So I'm going to do this actually with this here, just the Petri holder itself, which is fine because the water is clean. Watch again. To be honest, this is probably a bit faster than 30 seconds. Great. Turn the pumps off. That looks better. As you can see, although it might be a little bit poor in video quality here, there are 24 different deposition spots on the Petri holder there. That is a bit fuzzy, but best we can do with what we've got here. So yeah, you can actually see little droplets that were sampled from each of these in about 10 seconds or so. And that is because the room aerosol is being condensed into droplets and sampled onto the surface. One of the ways that we can actually check this and be able to confirm this information is by repeating this test with a filter on the inlet. How to do that? Exact same conditions, exact same flow rate of 15 liters per minute. Dry Petri holder here, installed into place. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that coming out of the moderator, as we have talked about in the video plenty of times, see, you're still at 100% RH. So if this Petri holder is a little bit colder than the dew point required of the coming out of the moderator, you might still see something, but you will definitely see quite a bit less. So as you can see, with no particles coming in, I can see tiny, tiny, tiny little potential marks of where there's some amount of, condensate forming there. But it definitely is not the same as when there's not aerosol coming through, right? Because we are only able to work on the thermodynamics of vapor-filled air blowing over a surface over where the nozzle points are. So you can tell no particles coming in, you're not going to get it to happen. Repeating it again, pop this bad boy off, drop this in, and we'll turn it on. Plus, it's fun to watch, to be honest. Great. Turn it off. There we go. Great little deposition pattern there. They don't have to be perfect. You can imagine these droplets are hitting a slippery surface here, as you saw with me not doing extremely well with a Petri dish here. It's not always perfect to do if you have a little bit of oil on the surface of some kind. But as long as you are generally seeing this jet pattern, then you're in good shape. If you, though, for example, for each of these 8 growth tubes, if you're not seeing one of these, then that might mean one of these jets has been fully clogged. Or if, for example, you're only seeing 4 out of the 8, that would mean that one of the 2 injection pumps that is providing water to 4 growth tubes at a time or 4 wicks at a time is not functioning properly, and you're only getting half the efficiency you'd expect. So it's a reason it's a pretty good quick test because you're already having to get the instrument wet, get the pumps on, everything else going. We'll do Petri dish one more time so you can see. And again, make sure that the pumps are off prior to unscrewing it, or else you kind of get this odd circular pattern that isn't as applicable. There we go. Still looking good, but of course, yeah, with the Petri dish here with the oil I've got on it, it's not exactly perfect. But you can still see droplets coming out and hitting the surface at any given point in time. So still looking fairly successful, even though I have made it not look as good by having oil on Petri dish here. But as you can see, this is definitely very successful doing it. One other thing I was going to show off is an example of a troubleshooting method that you could perform with this. So a good example being I will unscrew the trap bubble. It's going to be no air going through the growth tube right now, right? So although we have correct temperatures and a wet wick, if I turn on the pump for the same amount of time as usual, we should expect nothing will show up on the petri dish here because via unplugging this whole trap bottle, we have no airflow through the growth tube. Similar things, you can do this exact same experiment, not having the temperatures be correct on your instrument, not having your wicks be wet in any capacity. And now we snag this. Absolutely nothing. And if we plug it back in and rescrew this bad boy in, we should get a perfectly good to go spot test. After we do this one last time, I think that we'll talk over other details. Of course, as noted by this filter experiment, you need particles coming through to form droplets to do this test. We have pretty good air quality in here, so you don't need a lot, to be honest. As long as you have something that can form on the surface. There's not really a exact science to how long the experiment needs to be. So yeah, there is. Let's see if I can get that a bit closer. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit fuzzy. Sorry for the video quality here, but you can see pretty adequately what the pattern is there. I will turn the instrument off. Uh, yep. So if you have no particles, that's a question. If you have no, you could be worried about if there's not water getting to the wicks, maybe the airflow is not working correctly, temperatures. This is effectively a way to confirm any and all potential issues with the Vivus prior to experimentation. I'd recommend doing one of these after you've got the wicks wet, as long as you've got a spare petri dish, or as you've seen, or just a available, just your petri dish holder, install it dry, and then just have one of these, just a paper towel, wipe it off before you put your petri dish in there, and that will allow you to confirm you are capturing aerosol adequately. So, thanks for your time. I've been Braden Stump. Feel free to reach out to Handix Scientific if you have more questions or if anything wasn't clear, and happy sampling. Best of luck.